This is Pete Moore on Halo Talks NYC. I have the pleasure of having a friend of ours, Elana Frankel from Indigo and Haze, on the show, native New Yorker. Welcome to Halo Talks.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Excellent, excellent. There'll be no sarcasm on this channel today, but if you have a little bit, we'll keep it in and not edit it out. So why don't you, what I want to accomplish here, and you've got a thriving CBD cannabis business branded in New York, and you've had some life experiences that have kind of brought you here, and you've also got a great background in more traditional jobs that people have. So, part of the goal here today would be to educate our listeners on the benefits of CBD, kind of a little bit of a tutorial and where you think that market's going to. Is talk about you as an entrepreneur and taking the step and getting partners and building a business, from scratch. And then, some of the tips that you have along the way and, where you see the future and what it looks like. So why don't you give your background on where you're from, where you started, and then we'll get to educating all of us on the sector that you're in.
Great. I love to lead with education. It's the most important part of this journey for sure. So as you mentioned, I was traditionally in a traditional profession. I started out in publishing. I was an editor at a variety of different magazines, but particularly working in the design field, interior design and architecture. I had sort of been in the field a long time. I had made it to the style editor at Architectural Digest. I thought, I've hit the top. This is it. I got there. I worked there. I was miserable. So
Any listeners have the same feeling right now? Join the Halo sector.
So I made the switch to online retail, but the online retail experience was brand new back then, e-commerce, and we really focused on storytelling and editorial to sell. Mm-hmm. And so at One Kings Lane, which was the company that I worked for, I was the style and eventually creative director there. And it was wonderful. We put together an incredible group of creatives to establish a creative agency within the organization. So we were able to set up our own photo studio to create content assets for not only the website and for selling, but also for advertising, marketing, blogging, editorial, print, in real life experiences. And it was exciting. It was fun. I was traveling. I was going here. I was going there. And then I had an accident.
Tell us what happened.
I was in Miami, Art Basel, with girlfriends for a girls' weekend, which I never do. I don't like being away from work. I don't like being away from family. But I said, you know what? For 2 nights, let's try it. So flew down to Miami, got to the hotel, was sitting by the pool, had some lunch, hanging out with some girlfriends, went upstairs to get ready for dinner. My girlfriends were taking a very long time. I do not take that long. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go downstairs to the bar. I'll have a glass of wine. I'll wait for you there. Mm-hmm. Great. Was sitting at the bar, ordered a red, wasn't particularly liking it. Thought it tasted funny, so I just stopped drinking it and maybe had 2 or 3 sips. We got to the restaurant. We ordered appetizers. I stood up. I said, you know what? I'm not feeling too well. I'm just going to use the ladies' room. Opened my eyes. I was having a CAT scan.
Wow. So do you know what happened? Do you think you got the wine was spiked, or you think you had something going on independently?
At first, so the first thing that came to my girlfriend's mind was I was roofied.
Right.
And so I don't remember this because I was passed out on the floor, but apparently she had called my sister, and my sister had asked for me to be tested to see if I was roofied. And although I don't remember it, apparently at that moment, I must have heard it unconsciously because I stood up and said, nobody roofies a middle-aged suburban mother of 2. And then I went back down. So when I got to the hospital, I was tested for a whole bunch of different things, including being roofied, which I was not. And the final assessment was, we're not sure what happened. Okay. We're not sure if it was a seizure, fainting seizure. All they know that happened was I fell back. I fractured my skull. Oof. The impact was so intense that my head thrust forward. And so my brain hit my cranium and I damaged the frontal part of my brain. So the back and the front. I woke up with 2 big black eyes and a fractured skull.
You look great now compared to that visual, by the way.
Thank you. But the worst part about it, if there could be a worst part about it, was that my brain was swollen. I had a TBI, I had a traumatic brain injury, and my head was swollen. I looked and acted like a stroke victim. Side note, one thing I do remember is that they didn't have a private room for me in the beginning, so I had to share a room with a 65-year-old man who had Tourette's syndrome.
Oh, wow.
And I do remember being in better shape than he was,
right,
but still not in good shape. So I basically was slurring my words. I was short-circuiting. I couldn't take any stimuli. If the lights were on, if somebody was talking to me, God forbid someone should be talking to me head on and to the side, I would freak out.
And that guy's talking all the time. Right.
I mean, the profanity that came out of that guy's mouth, while it was like, for me exciting, it was a little bit insane.
Right. Did you learn anything new on the profanity side? I kind of feel like you could be in an encyclopedia.
That's a whole other episode. That's another episode we can get into. But yeah,
that'll be the explicit version released after 11.
The director's cut. Halo at night.
Halo at night. I like that.
Write that down.
Halo at night.
Eventually I got into a private room, and eventually my mom flew down to come get me because my husband stayed at home with our children. We have children. And the doctor said, listen, we need her to stay down here for 3 months. She can't fly. We don't want her to drive back in case she needs medical attention in the middle of nowhere. My mom was like, no, like that can't happen. I mean, financially, it couldn't happen, but also for a mental state, it couldn't happen, and also for my personal life.
Yeah, your kids would think that
my kids, my husband, my job, everything. Mm-hmm. So she negotiated with the doctors that I can get home if she finds me a flight where the
Felt like a Medivac or something?
Well, they first said Medivac to me, and then that was the financial thing. We looked at the numbers, and we were like, whatever.
It's like 30 times a first-class flight to Asia or something.
So if she could find a flight where the air marshal, was trained in TBI, I can get on that flight, I can go home.
So just as a side note, like there's an air marshal on every flight. Is that true?
Back then.
I
don't know about now, but I think back then it was pretty
after September 11th,
common,
there were literally like undercover U.S. Marshals on every single domestic flight for several years. It was unbelievable.
For sure. And this was 5-6 years ago.
Right. Yep.
So we got on a flight, and the reason why I know we got on the flight, I don't really remember much of it. What I do remember is being one of 10 people on wheelchairs trying to get onto the flight, and me being the youngest by far. Right. There were a lot of stroke victims.
So this U.S. Air Marshal was like a specialist in...
And God knows what he could do in the middle, like 30,000 feet, like,
10 on one.
Yeah, exactly.
At that point, it's like a Soul Cycle class of like trouble, right?
Anyway.
Like we do a Group X here, landing in 3 hours. Everyone keep breathing.
So we got on the flight, and I got home, and I got right into bed. I mean, the idea.
So they let you actually go home.
They let me go home because, quite frankly, the healing process for a traumatic brain injury is bed rest. They can't do anything until your brain is not inflamed anymore and calms down. And the rest is just what it is, the rest. So you lay there in bed, you have no stimuli, the lights are off, no TV, no loud noises, nothing.
Just one point on bed rest, just for people that are potentially pregnant or going to be pregnant. They should know that bed rest actually means stay in your bed. It doesn't mean house arrest, right? I mean, you literally stayed in your...
I did, and that was really challenging for me.
Yeah, but
really
just want to make that definition clear for people. When you say house arrest versus bed rest versus light exercise, like those are three distinctive things.
And it's not a bed on the second floor either. It needs to be a bed on the ground floor.
Yeah.
So after a couple days, even in my state of short-circuitedness and inflammation, this wasn't working. This wasn't working for anybody. And it wasn't definitely going to work for up to a year, which is what they told me it was going to be, maybe even up to 3. And at this point, too, you get back to New York, and everybody knows the top neurologist here and the top neurosurgeon there, and this person, you got to talk to that person, blah, blah, blah. So I ended up having appointments with various neurologists, and they all pretty much said the same thing. We don't know what the damage is. We can't understand what's going on until the inflammation recedes, and that is bed rest.
Got it.
That wasn't going to work. I couldn't do it. We couldn't do it as a family. So my husband started to do some research, and although I had been in the publishing industry for a long time, I had also been a yoga and continued to be a yoga teacher. I got certified in 2001. And so I was open to alternatives. I was open to acupuncture. I was open to Reiki. I was open to anything that would get me to where I need to be so I could function again as a human being, as a mother, as a wife. So he came back with the traditional acupuncture Reiki, but he also came back to me and said, I found some obscure literature online. It was obscure then. About CBD. And in my still short-circuited state, I was like, blah. He translated to what is that? Because he now could speak my language, my slurred language. And he said, it's cannabis. And I said, there's no way I'm getting stoned.
Right. So why don't you explain to people here in short period of what the difference between how the plant works, CBD versus THC, and then talk about the research that you found and tested.
At that point, I was ignorant. I didn't know. I had been a responsible recreational user occasionally, and I knew about medical marijuana, and that was it. So I knew that spectrum. I knew at one end, people got stoned to have fun, and I knew people got stoned to help them with nausea at chemo.
Right.
But what I didn't understand and didn't know is this whole area in between on the spectrum, this whole area of the plant compounds, what it means to have a plant extract. And so through learning and unlearning, we spent a lot of time researching and talking to people, and we were very lucky in that we had contact with people who were much more educated than I was, everywhere from cultivators and growers to manufacturers and plant specialists.
And this was how many years ago? Because the industry was
5.
Yeah, so the industry was basically just turning into a legitimate business, and there was a number of
and there was
planters
and there was a different experience on the West Coast versus the East Coast.
Sure, yeah.
So the West Coast, this was nothing, but to prohibitionist East Coasters, this I had no idea. I had no clue. And so like I said, we spoke to tons of people, we educated ourselves, and what we came back with is this idea of using the compound within the plant, CBD, versus THC. And in very simple terms, they're both compounds of the plant. They're both plant extracts, but the CBD oil is non-intoxicating, while the THC oil is what makes you feel stoned and high.
Right. When you take THC, which I might have done a couple of times recently, responsibly on an aircraft, not in the exit row. Anyway, when you take THC, does it also come with CBD, or do they actually separate the two for?
So it depends. And that's the other thing that we had to sort of educate ourselves about, is that there are different strains. There are different types of extraction processes. There are different plants. There's the hemp plant. There's the marijuana plant. A lot of people look now at ratios of THC to CBD, 2 to 1, 1 to 1. So what you're looking for is what you need. So if you are in the need for a more relaxing flight and you want a more THC-based experience, you're going to look for a strain or some sort of experience, some sort of protocol, whether it's vaping, tincture, topical, whatever it is, edible, that is going to be higher in THC ratio than CBD.
Gotcha. So, fast forward to your use of it and what results you got, and then why you decided to actually get into the sector versus saying, hey, I'm a user of this product and that's enough.
So we found a protocol that worked for me. And one of the things that is very challenging with cannabis is that it's a personal experience. So what might have worked for me might not have worked for you for various reasons. I'm a woman, you're a man, hormonal imbalance, we have a different internal footprint, et cetera. So I found the protocol that worked for me, and what worked best at that time was a tea. So I would drink a hemp-derived tea, CBD high, CBD rich.
What kind of dosage? Like how many milligrams were you taking versus like if you take 5 milligrams of CBD or take 5 milligrams of THC,
so
you might get a little.
At that point, I didn't know. I didn't care. It just was how I felt. It was just trying to understand how much I needed to feel better.
Got it. Okay.
So I started with a cup. I just made myself a cup of tea like I usually do. I'm a big tea drinker. And so I was comfortable with that. I understood it visually. I understood the experience of drinking tea. It wasn't scary. And we then started to play with how many cups of tea it took to, the idea is you start low and slow. So you start with a small amount, and then you figure out what your dosage is and what your threshold is, and then you start to go back.
When you say a threshold for CBD, like what could happen to you? Because obviously there's not any component to the
So
CBD
some of the side effects of CBD are diarrhea,
okay,
and a rash,
okay,
or for some people, CBD has a calming experience, and for some people, CBD can keep them very alert and awake and focused. Side note, I have a friend in North Carolina who tries our tea that we have now on the site, and she takes it about 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the office, and she is like highly focused, and she will get work done, and she is like, this is amazing. I take CBD before bed. I sleep like a baby.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So you saw dramatic improvements, not only in how you felt, but also when you were taking subsequent CAT scans and the inflammation went down. Is that
so? I never actually got a subsequent CAT scan. As a matter of fact, the idea was for me to just get better. I, at that point, didn't really want to be part of the medical experience anymore, the typical traditional medical experience, because basically they never even told me to get a follow-up CAT scan. They're just like, come back when you feel better, and we'll assume your brain has, deflamed.
That's very, that feels troubling of like, well, you don't want to see me, like, let's set like a milestone for you and for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It was challenging. It was definitely challenging.
Yeah.
And so when I started to feel better, I started to get up out of bed and make small moves. I was able to play with my kids. I was able to return an email. One of the side effects that still is a little tricky with me is I lost my sense of smell and taste. Taste has come back
from the injury,
fall.
Right?
Yeah, taste has come back, not fully, but close, and smell has not come back at all.
Wow.
Which has been fascinating to experience, especially when you're working in an area with aromatherapy and terpenes and things that smell is important. So that's been also a fascinating side note.
It could have some positive benefits if you go to the
Totally,
gym
when
and
you're
sitting next to someone who's like, or an airplane, or like, whoa, this guy.
I'm the mother of 2 boys. I'm fine.
Yeah. Just like a positive side effect. Obviously,
I got to find the silver lining in everything.
Silver lining, yeah.
So I started to feel better. And I started to feel better enough that I actually went to work 1 or 2 times a week, pretty rapidly, like within 3 months.
How were they related to understanding that this was kind of an open-ended, not sure when I'm comking back?
Oh, they were amazing. The company was unbelievable.
That's awesome. Good to hear.
I've never been more grateful and been more and felt more loved in a company than I did at One Kings Lane. They were extremely happy to have me back 1 day a week, 2 days a week, and eventually 5 days a week, and eventually at full speed. So I was very grateful, and I continue to be grateful to this day.
That's great.
What I didn't do, though, when I got back to work is explain how I got there. I was still at that point unable to articulate to people that I was feeling better because of cannabis. It sounded crazy to say out loud to myself, let alone in a company, because everyone said to me, how'd you get back so fast? Like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, bed rest, yoga, acupuncture, deep breathing. My voice gets really high when I'm not really fully telling the truth. And so I focused
better
on
than
that.
Your nose getting bigger.
Exactly.
Yeah. Pinocchio or something.
So I sort of, didn't really talk about it very much.
Because it wasn't as socially acceptable 3-4 years ago?
100%. I mean, it still has some stigma attached to it, a little bit less, but still has some stigma attached to it. And quite frankly, it sounded ridiculous.
Right.
It sounded ridiculous to say to people, I was drinking hemp-derived CBD-rich tea, and I'm able to get up out of bed.
Yeah. Now, are you able with? So let's fast forward to your company now, and how you partnered with your founders. Are you able to make some of these claims related to like how it helped you and like a testimonial? Because obviously it's not like FDA approved or you can't say this. Like I always see
And nor
that.
would I want to. I mean,
sure.
honestly, I'm not in the business of telling people that this is going to cure this.
Right.
Take this and you will no longer feel that.
I always see those Prevagen commercials like, we're going to make your memory better. And then it's like, this is not approved by the FDA. And then they have to pay a fine. Like, I don't know, they pay a lot of fines, but they seem like fine with it because they're making enough money on the advertising. I don't know why things got shut down.
Yeah,
It's
we're
crazy.
not there yet. We're so far from there yet.
I got you. Okay.
So what we decided to do, what I decided to do basically is, I said to my family, listen, this experience has been an eye-opener. It's been great being in this business for a long time, publishing, editorial, e-commerce. But I think that there's something here, and I think that there's something incredible here, and I want to make a go of the CBD world as a business.
So where did the name Indigo and Haze come from?
That came from my husband. We were fooling around with names. Wait, that sounded a little like I shouldn't say fooling around with my husband.
Yeah.
We were
Fooling around with names.
we were playing around with names, and
We're probably not going to edit that, by the way. Just let it go. Just let it go. What's his name, by the way?
Dan.
Thank you, Dan, for your research and is he working brand marketing or is he in finance?
He was in toy design at the time.
All right, Dan, welcome to the show remotely.
So he knew for years my love for the color indigo. He knew that I love indigo fabrics. I love indigo, the color, the paint, anything having to do with indigo. It's my thing.
I'm colorblind, so I have no idea what color that is.
Oh, we'll talk about your blood vessels later in your eyes. But we loved the word indigo. We love how it was evocative without being too evocative.
Yep.
And he's the Haze, quite frankly. So I love him to death. He's one of the smartest, most incredible people that I know. But he lives in a haze. Like he lives up here in this world, 30,000 feet above all of us. And he floats around and he thinks, he's an introverted thinker, and he's just in a haze. And so we talked about the word indigo, and then we talked about the word haze. And then all of a sudden he said, why don't we just put them together and call it indigo and haze?
Love it.
It clicked. It was nice.
Trademarked.
Done. And
By the Frankels.
Tashman. He's a Tashman.
Oh, he's a Tashman. Frankel and Tashman. Indigo and Haze. All right.
So we talked about it, and then we actually talked about needing a partner. We talked about wanting to work because a collaborative experience was a much better experience for me. And so we talked about trying to find partners. And I had been talking with my cousin Justin for years about partnering up in a business. We had talked about previously a couple of other ideas, tried to make it work, wasn't really the right timing, etc. But I called him up and said, listen, where are you? And he said, I'm on the train heading back from the city to my house. What's up? And for the next 40 minutes while he was on the Metro North, I laid out this whole idea. And by his stop, he was like, I'm in.
Gotcha. And then, so the three founders of the company are you,
my cousin Justin,
Cousin
and our
Justin.
third founder then was a friend of Justin's who's in finance, and he said to me, I have got this friend who's also been talking about CBD. Why don't the three of us meet?
Cool.
Three of us met.
And that was about 2.5 years ago.
A little bit more, probably like
Okay.
3.5. And we sort of were trying to figure out what it looked like in that time period, because back then it was much more of an underground, especially on the East Coast. People didn't really talk about CBD, not like they do today. It was sort of a, people needed education. And when you said cannabis, they went straight to marijuana, and they went straight to getting stoned, or they went straight to, do I need a medical license? So, or medical card. So we realized there was this whole gray area, this whole sort of area in the spectrum that we wanted to sort of explore. We thought about it in terms of wellness. And that's how we sort of started to think about it, wellness, not recreational use, not hardcore medical hospital use, dispensary use, but this whole area in between, wellness. So we started talking about CBD wellness and what that looked like. And what it looked like to us was an everyday experience, because what I was sort of, and continue to be fascinated with, is that CBD particularly is a plant extract, not unlike aloe, lavender, echinacea, St. John's wort, any sort of plant extract that you would put in anything, topicals, tea, essential oils, to create a certain experience. Lavender for comfort and relaxation, St. John's wort to help you sleep, echinacea if you have a cold, all of the things that we are used to hearing and are used to seeing in health food stores and quite frankly in big chains, but that are accepted. And so for me, normalization and destigmatization meant that. Trying to let people understand that this is not THC, it's not intoxicating, it's not going to get you stoned, but it is a natural anti-inflammatory, naturally antibacterial, and hemp-derived, it's a natural moisturizer.
So you've got your team put together. It was about 3 years ago. Where can you buy the products now? And what's I know you're doing a lot online. Is there also distribution points that you're looking for in traditional retailers? And
so we started
I saw
off,
some in a deli the other day with had a frog that looked like a too big of a gummy bear for me to even consume. Whatever.
Please don't buy that.
Yeah, no, actually.
Please don't buy that.
I actually bought it and then I threw it out because I was like, this is like.
So we started off first and foremost seeing what we wanted to sell, basically, and what I wanted was an everyday moisturizer. You get out of the shower, get out of the bath. You moisturize your skin. There was nothing out there. There was a lot of pain salves. There was a lot of pain management products. I'm sore. I pulled a muscle. I'm at the gym. I put this on. I feel better. That's great. That's not what I wanted. I wanted an everyday experience for people to feel like they could just go to CVS and instead of buying Eucerin or Cetaphil, whatever body moisturizer they used, they could buy our product.
Gotcha.
And so, and like I said, because it's naturally anti-inflammatory, moisturizing, antibacterial. And so we partnered with a formulator and a maker in Colorado to create this body lotion. That was our first product and continues to be a great product and a bestseller to this day. And then we found a essential oil, purely balanced essential oil roll-on, which I have a sample here.
Thank you.
And
lovely bottle.
Thank you. And a bunch of other different products that we wanted to create. But then we also found, because of my experience with the tea, that there were people out there doing great work and creating great products that we wanted to sell. So we decided on this business model of a marketplace where we would be able to provide our own label for products that I didn't see on the market, but as well as partner with vendors who are already established and have great product that we would resell. As a typical retail experience.
Right. So your goal here is your brand becomes more of the place you go as a trusted source.
Correct.
To get this.
Because it's highly curated.
Right.
We don't have very many products. We're really, really particular about what we put on the site. And because we focus on inspiration and education as well. So the beginning, before we even went online, our business model was like a Tupperware party. So we would go to people's homes.
Right.
The homeowner would invite 20 of her girlfriends. Sometimes the husband would come along. And we would throw a Tupperware party with our product. And we would spend a lot of time educating people. We would spend a lot of time talking to people, helping them learn and unlearn. And sometimes they bought on the spot. Sometimes they didn't. At that point, it didn't really matter. It was almost like focus group marketing research for us. But what ended up happening is, yes, they did buy, but then they also ended up letting it sink in. And a couple of days later, we'd get online orders because we set up a website.
Gotcha.
We continue to throw these Tupperware parties and go to people's homes, and it's still the most successful, most rewarding experience because part of it is that sense of human interaction and one-on-one contact and explaining, educating, like I said, learning and unlearning so that you don't feel overwhelmed or you don't feel like you're doing something illicit or scary.
Gotcha. So last question, as you see more and more of the large consumer product companies, going to start to put CBD in because now it's more mainstream, do you see your company as remaining independent? Do you see, Indigo and Haze potentially becoming a marketplace for others that are, that maybe gets rolled into a larger e-commerce platform? What's your view of the company? Because there's obviously going to be a lot of people knocking on your door that are going to say, hey, I want to get into the sector. And instead of me setting up my own platform, why don't I acquire your company, or why don't I become, an affiliation with you? Because I feel like the industry is moving so quickly that being an independent company might not, you might get great offers for the business because it's like people want to jump in and they want to get in now and not wait.
Yeah, so we're here right now where we are. And, I get this question a lot. We're a marathon, not a sprint.
Good.
And so we're here for the long haul. We didn't get into this for the quick buck. We didn't get in this for the glory.
Right.
We got into it. I got into it because I believe that this plant is a healing plant, and that for so long we have been told the wrong things, and lots of people have suffered because of it. Mm-hmm. And it is time to reverse that course. It is time to bring back the plant as it once was, a healing tool, and make sure that when it does go out into the marketplace, whether from us or whether from Big Farm or whether from the bodega, that what's going out there is good product, safe product, well-made product, and product that works for you.
That's great.
Period. End of story.
Excellent. So why don't you give everybody the web address, and we can convert them into listeners. Feel free.
Indigoandhaze.com.
Thank you, Mr. Haze. And look forward to taking some CBD, testing it out, see how it helps me. And congrats on the success. I'm sorry to hear about what happened, but you seem like you're even better than before.
I feel great.
Awesome. Thanks for being on the show.